Alright, so I just want to talk a little bit about electric skateboards for a minute. And I'm going to kind of wander all over the place here, but generally I just kind of want to talk about them as a consumer, you know, buying them and looking at them as a product and how worth it they all are. So it's all going to be very vague in general, but I'll get right to it. So this is originally going to be a follow-up video for when I got this guy, and I made that video 2 years ago, but I never ended up doing that, partially because it died. So I only had this thing working, and I rode it for it's actually less than 50 miles. And in that time, I had problems with a spring washer busting in one of the hub motors. I had one of the hub motors develop some sort of winding issue, but then one side of the controller also died. And I tried to fix it, but I eventually just lost interest. So, I was really happy with what I was getting out of this thing. I feel like it was adequate, and it was fun, and it was an interesting thing, worthwhile board to have. But it just didn't end up lasting long. And that's kind of one of the main points I wanted to make, was that I didn't see this as... I saw this... What this board fulfilled successfully was kind of more of being a novelty and being a toy. This is not something that I could imagine you, if you're interested in getting into electric skateboard as a hobby, and you're wanting to put a bunch of money in and you're expecting to get a lot out of it, then you're not going to do that with a board like this. And by boards like this, I mean any board that you're getting in the same price range that this guy was in. So this was originally being sold for $700, and they dropped it down to $500. It might be less than that by now, maybe $400 or $350. But here's the thing: all of the cheap Chinese electric board brands are the same thing. There's the same manufacturers making all the different same hub motors and all the same ESCs, and maybe the battery packs might be different, but the guts of it all is really all the same across all of the cheap brands out there, pretty much. So this is Team Gi, and they popped up, and the speed controller in here, it's completely exact same model number as what's in a bunch of the WowGo boards and the Meepo boards and probably a dozen other brands. So when I made the review, I think I tried to mention this, and it's not so much, you know, how good this board is or how good this brand is. The entire ecosystem is the same, and so I try to make my review more about the form factor of this board, which is the unique thing about it, and address the ecosystem as something set. What I wanted to do in my video, my follow-up, was to kind of be really explicit about that fact. And so all the boards in this class, which is going to be any cheap electric skateboard, if you're interested in electric skate as, you know, a novelty or a toy, like, I think that this type of product can fulfill that. But if you're looking to get into electric skateboarding as a serious hobby or a serious supplement to your problems that you are suffering and your addiction there, then you're going to need to be looking into something that's substantially more expensive, substantially more developed, and has a more substantial backing behind their product. And Boosted really was that thing very early on. And unfortunately they're not now, because they're not anything now. But Boosted filled that role. They came in, and that's kind of part of what made them what they were at the beginning. So yeah, this is a Generation 1 dual motor boosted board, and I can't remember what these would have cost new. I just recently got this used, and I bought it used for $450, which was a really good deal. But this thing has, when I got it, had 770 miles on it. This thing I only got 50 out of. So they're just, it's a completely different class of product. And this thing, like, it was adequate. What it did was adequate until it wasn't doing it anymore. But, you know, as far as its performance, it was adequate, and I could get behind what it was capable of. But this is it's a different class, and it does a lot more, and it does a lot more reliably. So my point is, if you're going to get it, you're going to be spending over $1,000 on a board. Right now, boosted isn't an option anymore. I would still recommend, just based on my experience with this so far, I would say that used boosteds are a viable option. But I think the thing to be a little wary of is the battery health. These are not the easiest batteries to refurb, as I understand it. But I wanted to be getting into DIY electric boards anyway. So rebuilding the battery on this thing eventually, I'm not too afraid of, as long as it lasts a while for me. So yeah, so boost is not an option right now. I'm not sure what other brands out there are kind of fulfilling this role reliably. OneDrive for sure I can back as a really well-built, reliable product, and I think that's where a lot of people are going right now, is with the one wheel, and that's actually what the guy I bought this from was selling this to get a one wheel. So one wheel is definitely a good option if you. I don't want a one wheel because I want the feel of a longboard. So the one wheel is not going to do that for me. Yeah, but besides one wheel right now, I'm not sure what else is out there. There's a lot of stuff. There's nothing really that stands out with the name recognition that Boosted had yet, besides one wheel. So I guess my whole point with this video is really just to say that if you're going to get into this and you're going to buy new, you should be prepared to be spending some pretty significant money, and don't think that cheaper things are going to be comparable to the more expensive stuff out there. Let's see. What's some of the things I want to talk about that I've been wanting to talk about that are not big enough for their own video? Let's talk about the drive options a little bit here. So the Team Gi had these hub motors. I like the hub motors for a few reasons, and I like these belts for a few reasons too. After riding both, I've been under the impression that I want to avoid belts and separate motors, and that direct drive might be the way to go with moving forward with Escape. And direct drive is where you move the motor out from inside the wheel over to further in the shaft, and then you have it's basically the wheels directly coupled with the motor. And I think I still really like the concept of direct drive. My experience with the hub motors is I feel like there's too much risk of being constrained by the tires. Whereas the cool thing about these guys is getting the wheels you want on there. I really like that, and all the things that I felt would be a drawback haven't been so bad so far. I don't know, I can't remember if I mentioned so far, but I've put 25 miles on this guy so far. And it's quite a lot in the time I've had it. I've had it for 2 weeks. Another thing I wanted to mention is that right now there's a lot of options in DIY. And I think DIY is probably... It's DIY, you can get some seriously reliable stuff with DIY. But you can also get so much into it as a DIY thing that it never gets out of constantly being a DIY thing. Which, I mean, it's always a little project and it's never 100%. Whereas a product that's developed and is asking $1,000 and has a brand and a warranty behind it has to be 100%. So, so DIY is going to be, if you're interested in a project, an ongoing thing, as is very, very common with anything in the DIY field. But there's also some DIY corner makers who are good sources for buying product from that is going to be 100% and they're, you know, in their execution. So that's two things to consider. So I was also talking about wheel options a minute ago. Another thing to think about or talk about with wheels is mountain board, off-road wheels and tires. You can go kind of in, you know, you got kind of two different worlds going on here. And I think they're both very interesting in what they will do. So this thing right here, I've taken it out on grass, on dirt, and on gravel roads. Of those things, it handles the gravel roads the best, but my goodness, it's a wild ride. And it can't really do anything too reliably besides just pavement. And you will find with a motor, you get a little bit more adventurous in what you want to attempt. And so these guys can fulfill a lot of that. But at the same time, urethane wheels, they offer that longboardy feel, I guess. I don't have these electrified at all, but no matter what sort of hill you're on, you can feel that it's a different sort of feel, and it's got this sort of drag from the pneumatic tires, and the way they grip the road is different than the way that these grip the road. So I would consider these almost occupying two different spheres. But I definitely want to get something electric. Okay, here's something else. So because of all the drawbacks of the pneumatic wheels, how slow they can be and how much drag they've got on them, so I feel almost as though any pneumatic setup is not going to be reaching its fullest unless it's electrified. So if you're interested in a board that looks like that, you should be looking into an electric board that looks like that. Yeah, I think I'm running out of things to say. I've gone on so many tangents. But on the whole, I'm pretty happy with eSkate, and I really enjoy riding. I ride a lot more frequently having an electric board than without having one. And despite the size of my collection, it's been increasingly hard to find the time to get out. And with this guy, I'm riding on the uphill as well on the downhill, so I don't have to spend the 10 minutes before I get my first 2-minute session in. And I can ride at the speed I want, wherever I want, for however long I want. So I'm not just restricted to the steepness of the hill I can find for the length that it gives me the speed I want. I can get the perfect carvy hill in a parking lot. And that's really, for me, the magic of the e-skate. So I definitely feel as though it really is truly part of the same sport that's over here. So now I'm just going to go out and I'm going to ride this thing and I'm going to try to film it. And I'll probably talk a little bit more then as well. Right, so the first thing I did to this guy when I got it was to loosen up the bushings and make it so I could really crank out a turn. And also I like driving or riding with the motor in the front. I just feel like it has better stability and control, and I can have better brake force. And I feel as though if you're learning to ride, if you have your weight on the rear, off the motors are going to spin out on you, and so you're going to be trained, just from experience, to ride with your weight on the motor. And you don't want to get in the habit of riding with all your weight on the rear, because then you're going to get speed wobbles. So I feel like the front is preferable for those reasons. So the first day I got out and rode this, I actually rode it for was half the battery life, about an hour and a half, until I was just carving it up the whole time, getting used to the speed and all that. And by the time I jumped off, I could barely walk, and I had to lay down in the grass for a minute. Probably my biggest complaints with this board is the how narrow it is. I'm not able to use my full foot. I feel like I'm having to back and move my rear foot around. Well, my rear foot around a little bit more than I want. I don't feel like I'd have to do that if the board was wider. Another thing I should mention is that as far as electric boards are concerned, I think it's got to be dual motors, or it's really not usually worth it. The problem, so I rode my board, my Team G board a bunch when it just had the one motor working, and the problem is you go to accelerate, and unless you're leaning into the side that's motorized, it just spins out. And if you've got tight bushings, you really have to just be going straight, otherwise the drive wheel just lifts off the ground a little enough. Well, it doesn't lift off the ground, but it de-weights enough just to spin out, and it's kind of ridiculous. So I feel for most things, It's really got to be two wheels, two-wheel drive. I'm shaking a little bit because I do not like carving up too much while holding a camera. Alright, so I better wrap this up. I want to get out there and drain this battery, but I really don't like getting out there and riding too hard with a phone or my camera in my pocket, and especially when I'm holding the camera. That's I really don't like that. But there we go. This is definitely not the last you'll see of this board. I'm definitely gonna be messing around with this rear truck. I'm thinking about possibly okay. I think this deck is a little more flexy than I want, and it's got so much rebound in that flex. I was thinking, what if I laminate a sheet of Formica on the bottom and then remount everything? I may want to try that, but we'll have to see. I definitely want to get my time in as is before I mess with it like that. But anyway, there we go. Longboard technology. Over and out. Ramble, over and out.